All right, so this is going to be a review of heart blocks. And we're going to go through all the heart blocks here. We're going to go through a regular old first degree, and then a 2 type 1, 2 type 2, and so on and so forth. So what makes a heart block is usually the question, and why does that happen? So it goes back to electrical conduction through the heart once again, and we have our SA node. There we have our AV node. Here we have our bundle of his. And this time I'm going to draw the bundle branches in red. It makes it a little easier, I think, to see. And do our right bundle branch there. All right, so what happens in a heart block? Really, what happens in a heart block is that you get delayed conduction somewhere along the pathway, somewhere along any really part of this pathway here. So there's some sort of block, some sort of stoppage, something like that, or a slowdown, whatever it may be. Okay? So let's talk about just a simple old first degree block. Now, a first degree generally just means that either in the intranodal pathways or somewhere around here in the AV node, there's a delay in conduction. That's it. Just a simple delay in conduction from the firing of the P wave to the QRS. And really, most people don't even consider that to be a heart block anymore. We just call it first degree AV conduction delay, so we don't really even think of it as a heart block. Okay? So second degree type 1. Well, what happens is the electrical signal comes down, and then there's sort of a progress. So there's like a progressively slowing electrical conduction through the AV node. And so what you'll probably see is you'll see in the first one that the PR interval is normal, and then the PR interval gets a little longer and a little longer, and then eventually, you ain't going. And it won't allow that signal to go through, and that's what causes that drop in the QRS. In a second degree type 2, what happens is the SA node fires, and only part of the time does the AV node actually allow them through. So the SA node fires, and sometimes the AV node allows them through, sometimes the AV node does not allow them through. And so you can see how this is kind of progressively getting worse. It's going from just a simple delay to a little bit more of a delay to then every once in a while it's not allowing any through, until eventually we get to a full third degree heart block where now all the way across the electrical signal can fire out and fire out and fire out all at once, but it gets completely blocked. Every single time it gets here, it gets blocked. And so what happens is the tertiary system of the heart, the ventricles, start to go, well, I guess we should depolarize on our own. And so that's what they do. They depolarize. Okay? So in that third degree heart block, you have a firing of the SA node, and then it makes its way to the AV node, but at the AV node it gets completely blocked. It is fully blocked. There is nothing going through, and eventually the ventricles will just start to fire, and they'll sort of do their own thing. They figure, well, if nothing else is coming to us, we're not getting any communication, we might as well just do our own thing. So let's take a look at a few of these, and we'll see what we've got here. You can see in this one, and really when you're looking at blocks, the thing that you really want to look at is really PR. Right? So what is the relationship between the P and R? So I call it PR relationship. PR relationship. And it's the PR relationship, what's actually happening with the P wave, sort of, and the way that it reacts with the R is telling as to how that block is going. And so you're looking at this, and this is not really a heart block, right? This is a first degree AV conduction delay. Normally what I expect to happen, what I would like to see, is I would like to see if I'm starting my P wave, right? And remember, we always, when we're talking about an interval, like PR interval, then we're talking about the wave itself, okay? So the P wave is inside that PR interval, okay? And what we expect to happen is we expect the R wave to fall, whoops, we expect the R wave to fall within that exact same big box, okay? We expect the R wave to fall within that big box. And the R wave in this case doesn't. And the reason that we know that, we want the R wave to fall, within that next big box, is because a normal PR interval is 0.12 to 0.20 seconds, right? That's a normal PR interval. And this right here, we know from here to here is 0.2 seconds, or 0.20 seconds. So that means that R wave has to come within that big box. And you can see, obviously, here it does not. And you can check it again and see, yeah, it doesn't do it there either, right? It's very, very regular, no problems there, looking great. But that R wave, where the R wave starts, right there at the end of the Q, that R wave does not fall within that box. And so this is what we would call a first degree AV conduction delay. I don't really call it a block because it's not really a block. It's a first degree AV conduction delay. That's all there is to it. Okay? And so that's your first degree. Done. Done. If your first degree, if your R wave falls outside of that 0.20, then plain and simple, it is a first degree. All right, so let's talk about the other heart blocks, because those are the places where people usually have more problems. So let's look at a second degree type 1. So in the second degree type 1, we talked about how the conduction, right, in that AV node is being progressively slowed. So at first, the conduction may seem perfectly normal through the AV node, might be just fine. And then after that, it sort of gets slower, and so it takes more time, and maybe slower, and maybe slower, and so on and so forth, until eventually, it blocks, okay? And so let's look at this one right here. And what we're looking at is, you can see if you measured out, I'm using green, but that's okay. If you measure out your PR interval, it's already a really kind of delayed PR interval as is, but let's count the boxes. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little boxes. 7 little boxes. So I usually just do 7 times 4 is, wait for it, 28. Very nice. So those of you who answered correctly, good for you. So that tells me that it's 0.28 seconds. Well, we already know that's too long. All right, we want it to be within 0.20 seconds, and we know that that's too long. But now if you look at the next one right here, and we draw a line here, and we draw a line at the beginning of the P wave, we can start to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, so now we're looking at 8 times 4, or truthfully 8 times 0.4. All right? So it should actually be more like this, 0.04. Oh, see, there's a little O. So if we measured that, we do that, then we're looking at 0.32 seconds, right? So that tells us that it's even longer now, okay? And then same thing here, and you can figure it out. This one is longer too, and then this one gets longer too, and then look at this. The longest drops. So where I would expect to have a QRS, I'd expect to have that QRS. I should draw that in a different color. I would expect to have the QRS complex right there. It's not there. It's missing. And so what's happened is conduction through the AV node has gotten progressively longer and longer and longer and longer. And then eventually it gets as long as it can get, which means there is no conduction through the AV node. And then, like new, the AV node springs back to that beginning one again. Okay? springs right back to it again, and off we go. And sort of the same thing happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Okay? And that's what we call a second degree type 1. Second degree type 1. All right, so now let's look at a second degree type 2 and see if we can tell the difference between the second degree type 2 and second degree type 1. Most people will tell you a second degree type 2 is wide complex and a second degree type 1 is narrow complex. Well, most people are freaking wrong, because that's wrong. That's not true at all. You can have a narrow second degree type 2, you can have a narrow third degree, whatever. Don't let people tell you that's the way to identify it. Identify it using PR relationship, the relationship between the P wave and the R wave, okay? And so as you can see here, you look at this, beautiful. Look at that PR interval, very nice. It's even within the 0.20 seconds. Those PR intervals are great, no problem. But we do have a problem, don't we? What in the hell is this little P wave doing out all by itself? It's too small to be out by itself. What is it doing out all by itself? Doesn't have a QRS to correspond with it. We would expect QRSs to be here. Okay? This is the telltale sign that you have a second degree type 2. When you have these little damn P waves just sitting out there doing nothing all by themselves. Okay? You have those little P waves, they're just sitting there. They're all out there by themselves. Right? So we got a nice PR interval here, nice PR interval here, nice and consistent. You can see that the PR interval does not change or only has a very, very small variance that you couldn't even really measure because it'd be less than one small box. But then the real telltale sign is I've got these P waves just sitting out here all by themselves. Okay? So in a second degree type 2, what I expect to see is a nice PR interval sometimes, and then nothing, complete drops the rest of the time. Okay? Let's take a look at that third degree. Okay, and let me just label this real quick. This is its second degree type 2, or you'll hear me call it Mobitz 2, or sometimes people will call it a 2 type 2 or whatever. Now, some people would say, well, what's the conduction ratio? Well, the conduction ratio on this one is variable, because if you look, you have 1, 2 P waves, and then you have the QRS complex, then you have 1 and a QRS complex, and then you have 1, 2, 3 and a QRS complex. So the ratio on this one is variable. You can't really judge it to be a perfect ratio. There really isn't. Now, you can pattern find, and what will happen is if you print out a really, really, really super long strip, you will pattern find. You'll say, oh, look, every once in a while I get 2 of them will come together or something like that. That's fine. That's fine. But really, there doesn't have to be a pattern to it. So just because you see a pattern doesn't mean that it changes anything to it. It's still a second degree type 2. That really doesn't change. So let's look at a third degree. And again, you get those people that'll say, third degree heart blocks are wide. The QRS complex is wide. Again, bullshit, not true. Because if you look at this one, this is a perfect example of a third degree, but it's not wide, is it? All right? And what we'll notice about this is that, first of all, you can see the PR interval is variable, because then you got a P wave sitting over here, and then you got your QRS is right here, and then you got some P wave here, and then QRS over here, and then P wave there, and so the PR interval is completely variable in this case. Okay, PR interval will be variable. The telltale sign that you are looking at a third degree, it is extremely regular. Look at your R to R, and you literally could take and just go straight along here, and all of the R to R's will line up. Okay, they'll march out really nice, march down the page with no problems whatsoever. They're really, the R to R is absolutely beautiful. Well, the interesting thing about it too is that the P to P is also perfect. Right, so your P waves will march out, and your R waves will march out, or your QRS complexes, whatever you want to say. They'll march out, but they're not communicating. There's no communication, okay? And that's because electrically in the heart, if you look at the heart electrically, you look at the physiology actually inside this, what you're seeing is a complete electrical block all the way across the heart. There's a complete electrical block, and that means no electricity is getting through. So what you're seeing is beautiful firing from the SA node, absolutely no problem there whatsoever. And then the myocardium through the Purkinje fibers is having to depolarize itself. But they're not speaking. They're not speaking. They're not talking at all. The QRS complexes are doing their own thing, and the P waves are doing their own thing. And that is indicative of third degree. Don't look at the QRS and think, well, it's wide, so it must be a third degree. Again, people will tell you that. They're wrong. That's complete hogwash. Okay? People that really understand the physiology of a third degree can tell you why that is that sometimes, and let me clear these drawings out, can tell you why that is sometimes that you'll see a narrow versus a wide complex. So let me skip to the next page and I'll explain that to you. Why sometimes you'll get a QRS complex that's wide and sometimes you'll get a QRS complex that's narrow, okay? So here we go. We got our right bundle branch, and then here's our left posterior fascicle. Here's our left anterior fascicle of our left bundle branch. So here's what happens, okay, is remember, again, electrical activity, no problem here. SA node fires, SA node fires. So that means you get a really nice looking P wave. But because you have a complete electrical block, a complete heart block, now the QRS complexes are going to have to come from the Purkinje fibers themselves. Well, yeah, most people will tell you, again, the vast majority of your QRS complexes, sure, they will be wide because they generally come from the Purkinje fibers themselves out here, okay, and then they fire up and fire out and away. Well, that takes longer. Remember when we talked about bundle branch blocks, and we said that if you're going the back roads, if you're firing out of all of these Purkinje fibers and not actually firing, now keep in mind, not really actually firing out of those bundle branches, then you're going to see wide complexes, and they're going to be, because conduction is going to be delayed, and it's also going to be at a ventricular rate. So it's usually, in that like 20 to 40 range, right? Started right 40 to 60. In that 20 to 40 range, and that's normal. So what you see is if you count out the P waves, what you'll get is somewhere in that 60 to 100 range. And if you count the QRSs, you'll get somewhere in that 20 to 40 range, right? But what you could also have is you could also have a high block, which means either from the lower portion of the bundle of His or from the bundle branches you're getting firing. And so there is still function in those bundle branches, right? And so what you're actually seeing is what almost amounts to normal conduction going through the ventricles, except that the rate is usually slow. But you're seeing what looks like it could be normal conduction going through the ventricles. And so those P waves fire off. They have no connection to the QRSs. But then when the QRS fires, because it actually still goes down those bundle branches, we can still have what looks like sort of a normal QRS complex, okay? And that P wave, again, I just want to make sure that you understand that P wave really has nothing to do with this, okay? Because the P waves, again, they're going to be there, but they're just firing off. They're doing their own thing. So that's why sometimes you can see a narrowed third degree, because it does actually fire. It's it's what we would call a high nodal block, and so the block is maybe somewhere up in this area here, okay? And so there's your block. And then what happens is depolarization actually comes from the lower portion of the bundle of His, but then follows its way down and out those bundle branches. And so it actually travels in what looks like a normal pattern through the myocardium at that point. So I really hope we've cleared up. I've cleared up any questions you might have on bundle branch blocks, and on nodal blocks. So bundle branch blocks should be posted. That'll be posted first, and then nodal blocks will be posted second. So I really hope this kind of clears up what's going on in the physiology of the heart during those specific times of block. Oh, one last thing. You don't need a 12 lead EKG to tell if you have a nodal block, so a first degree or a second degree type 1 or second degree type 2 or third degree. You can see those on a regular old EKG. Regular old lead 2 works perfect for it. But in order to tell whether or not you have a bundle branch block, you have to have a 12 lead to really tell whether or not you have a bundle branch block. If you only have one lead, that does not tell you whether or not you have a bundle branch block. So, all right, that's it.